I'm not going to get too fanny. I love your work, so it's an honor to speak with you. I've been watching you for many years now.
Thank you.
And the chat, everyone is actually, I've done quite a few interviews, and don't tell anyone else, but this one has been like the one that everyone's like, I'm super excited for this one. So,
great.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and click here, get this here too. Okay, we can hear everyone in the chat. Can you guys hear well? Everything's fine? All right, perfect. We are good to go. You good, Robert?
Yes.
All right. Well, first off, Robert, thank you so much for joining me. I'm currently about in the middle of your book, The History of Jihad. I wrote my paper on Palestinian delusion last year. Like I said, I very much love your work and what you've been doing. You spent decades researching the intersection of, how do I say, political ideology, Islamism, and how these forces operate in the West, which is kind of what I want to talk with you about today. And also some recent developments, specifically Zohran Mamdani winning the election in New York City for mayor. For those who may not be familiar, how do you, just to get right off to it, how do you define the distinction between Islam as a religion and Islamism as a political ideology, and do you see any overlap?
The overlap is about 100%. Islam is inherently political. It always has been since the very beginning. And the reason why there are terrorist groups in the world today is because there is a disconnect that has never been experienced before in history between the political and the religious in Islam, and they want to bring them back together. The whole idea of Islam is to create an earthly paradise based on Islamic law, which Allah is the author of. And so it would create...
Recording in progress.
And so the perfect society... Should I start over? Did you just start recording that?
It's already being recorded. This is more of just a backup. You're fine.
Okay. So the perfect society is created by means of jihad for the imposition of Sharia, Islamic law. Islam has been political ever since Muhammad moved from, according to Islamic tradition, moved from Mecca to Medina 10 years into his, or 12 years into his life as a prophet. And he became for the first time a political and military leader rather than just a spiritual leader. This is incidentally, actually not incidentally, but a pivotal clue to how important politics is to Islam is the fact that Muhammad was indeed, according to Islamic tradition, calling himself a prophet and preaching and getting followers for 12 years in Mecca. But the year one of the Islamic calendar is when he moved to Medina and became a political leader for the first time. But years before that don't count as the beginning of Islam. Islam only begins when it becomes a political entity.
Actually, okay. I actually didn't know that. So, what? Oh, okay. So, what makes? There's a couple questions I have. Let me start with the first one. When he went to Yathrib or Medina, right? What is it? Do you think that was kind of always a plan, whether you're talking historically or in Islamic scripture or Sunnah or whatever? Do you think it was always a plan to become more of a political movement and where he became more of a warlord, etc.? Or do you think something happened when he went to Yathrib? Maybe power went to his head, whatever the case might be, that led him to become more of a political ideology?
Well, that's why they asked him to go there. According to the stories, they invited him to be their leader. And so he knew when he set out that he was going to become the political and military leader of the community in Medina or Yathrib. And that made that was the reason for the whole deal, because he was in Mecca without political power, without military power, and he felt victimized and at the mercy of the Quraysh, his tribe, but they had rejected his claim to be a prophet. So the Medinans were saying, come over here and be ruler over us, and we will accept you as a prophet. And he thought, great, then I will have a base and a population to rule from which I can gather troops to fight the Meccans, which is what he did.
Interesting. And so, with the second thing that I have, do you have more information on why they started it? The first year of Islam started it after he went to Medina. Why wouldn't they start it when he maybe got his first revelation?
Oh, you mean why year one of the Islamic calendar starts with the Hijrah?
Yes.
Because of the inherent political nature of Islam. You see, it is an earthly religion that is designed to be implemented in a political fashion and always has been. It is only after the abolition of the caliphate in 1924 that anybody ever envisioned Islam as not political. And wow. It is that terror groups point to 1924 and say that's the beginning of our troubles, because that's when the Islamic world fell into disunity and under the hegemony of the Western powers. And what we need to do is restore the caliphate, the supranational unity of the Muslims, and then we will be able to wage jihad more effectively. We'll be able to wage offensive jihad, which is the prerogative of the caliph only, and we will be able to fight against this pervasive Western influence. This is what Al-Qaeda says, ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah. It's all about 1924 and restoring the caliphate.
Wow. So you've warned before that the West is often naive, to put it lightly, in allowing Islamist ideologies to gain ground through soft power or worse. Can you explain what that looks like in practice? And do you also see the West as even possibly complicit in this?
Oh, of course. None of this would be happening if it weren't for craven, self-serving Western politicians. Absolutely. And so I'll answer in the first place by telling you a story. Some years ago, I was in Molenbeek in Belgium, and this is a heavily Muslim area. And I was walking around like the dumb happy tourist, taking a lot of pictures. And this guy came out from a halal butcher shop, and he wagged his finger at me, and he told me to stop taking pictures. And I said, I'm an American. I'm just taking pictures as a tourist. And he waved his finger again. He said, it's not allowed here. Well, what's not allowed? It's perfectly legal to take pictures in public places in Belgium. But as far as he was concerned, they were not under the rule of Belgian law. They were under the rule of Sharia, of Islamic law. There are far more serious stories of that all over Europe, and areas that are called popularly no-go zones. Been a lot of controversy about them, with people saying they don't exist and so on. But anybody who's been in France or Sweden or the UK, many other countries, they know they exist. You can walk around in them. It's not as if you wouldn't be allowed in. But the prevailing law is Islamic law. And you are expected, at very least, to respect the parameters of Islamic law. And if you do not, you'll have trouble. The authorities of the secular state are decidedly in a second tier. So in Malmo in Sweden, even police, firefighters, other public servants of that kind, they know that there are areas that they're not even allowed in, even if there's a crisis. That it's under Islamic law, and that's it.
Wow.
And so the problem is that these areas have been allowed to establish themselves and allowed to grow. And the more they grow, the more friction there will be with the larger society.
Wow. Do you think that, especially in Europe, more in contemporary times, maybe one day the United States even, do you see them as like, is this going to continue to grow until there's some kind of turning point or catalyst or something that causes people to wake up? Or do you really think that this is all part of the system within Islamic political ideology, and this is the whole point, is for them to take over these countries from the inside?
Well, how are those two things different? It is going to keep growing because there is this aspect of Islamic ideology that says to keep going. Fight them until persecution is no more and religion is all for Allah. That is chapter 8, verse 39 of the Quran. So you fight them the unbelievers, until persecution is no more. Remember this when people tell you, oh, jihad is only defensive. If we're not attacked, we leave everybody alone. Actually, if that passage ended with until persecution is no more, they might have a point. But it doesn't end there. It says, fight them until persecution is no more and religion is all for Allah. Now, what if you are just minding your own business and not bothering anybody, but your religion is not for Allah? Then there is one day going to be a Muslim who thinks, I have to fight this guy because his religion is not for Allah. And so the point is the jihad never ends. And they are going to keep on trying to assert the political power of Islam until they are stopped. They must keep going. It never ends. There's not going to be a time when they sit down and sign a paper and agree, you keep this area and we keep that one. If they do that, it is only a stepping stone toward gaining the whole thing.
Right, like the Hudaybiyah Treaty, right? And the Hudna, the concept of a Hudna.
Well, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is the paradigm for all treaty making in Islamic law. And the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is Muhammad negotiating from a position of weakness and agreeing agreeing to a truce, and then breaking it when he didn't need it anymore because he was stronger. And the law, Islamic law, says you only conclude a truce with an infidel force that you're fighting if you are losing and you need time to gather your strength to fight again more effectively. And so any time Hamas or some other Islamic entity calls for a truce, if the leaders of the opposition knew Islamic law, as they really ought to know Islamic law, then they would say the time when we should press on to final victory with more energy than ever is when they ask for a truce. But instead, all our politicians who know nothing whatsoever about Islam, they say, oh, hooray, they want a truce. They really see deep down they want peace. And so we'll sign this paper and we will live side by side in peace with them forever and everything is going to be okay. And then the rockets start flying and they say, what happened? Oh, they broke the truce. I can't believe it.
I find it interesting because Yasser Arafat in the Johannesburg address literally said to the Muslims to remember the Hudaybiyah, thank you for the correction and pronunciation, Hudaybiyah Treaty. And I think that's interesting. And you're right. I find it interesting even when I support the U.S. politicians that are in office. They never let Israel finish the job. So I assume, I'm sure it goes without asking, you see that happening again right now, yes?
Oh, very much so, yeah. And it's a shame because, of course, a lot of people might say, well, wait a minute, you just said the jihad never ends, and now you're saying Israel could have finished the job? Israel could have finished the job for the moment. Hamas began, and Hamas could end. Hamas could be eradicated from the face of the earth as an organization. Now, would the jihad continue? Yes. But it would be set back for years, maybe even decades, if Hamas were destroyed. Because you see, Allah promises victory to the pious. It's a one-to-one equation in the Quran. If you serve Allah, you will prosper in this world as well as in the next. The Bible is full of all sorts of lamentations about how the wicked prosper. The Quran is not. The Quran tells you if you serve Allah, you will win. Even the call to prayer, the azan, every morning, every 5 times a day, not just in the morning, when they call the faithful to prayer, what does it say? Come to prayer. Come to success. If you pray, you will succeed. Now, if Israel had defeated Hamas as it said it was going to do and destroyed Hamas completely, that is an immense rebuke to the whole idea of Islam. Islam would have been called into question because Allah promised them victory and he didn't give it. So a lot of them would just conclude, well, we weren't religious enough, and they'll become even more fanatical. But some of them would say, maybe this isn't working. Maybe this promise is empty. And that's what Kemal Ataturk did when he founded secular Turkey. He said, we lost the war, World War I, because of Islam. And what we need to do is discard Islam and create a Western-style secular republic after the fashion of those who won the war. And
Right.
that's the only time that any ruler in the Islamic world has done that, and it was in the face of tremendous defeat. And we could have given them another defeat like that, which would have caused that kind of soul searching again, and lost the opportunity. Gave it up.
Do you see Qatar as a Trojan horse in this aspect? Because with Iran, we do still consider them an enemy, but with Qatar, we consider them in the United States political sphere an ally. But I'm sure you and I and many people know that they're really not.
Yeah, it's insane. The man above your head, Donald Trump, he said it 9 years ago. He said that Qatar was a big supporter of terrorism around the world. And now he forgot. And he's acting as if we're best buds.
I don't get
And
it.
there is no good that can come out of this. There has been no indication since October 7th, 2023, that Qatar is any different from what it was when, on that day, the Hamas leaders were sheltered in Doha in comfort, getting down on their knees and making prostrations to thank Allah for murdering so many Israelis. They haven't changed.
It's insane.
They haven't changed a single bit. It's Trump that's changed. And we have no idea why. We have no idea what they told him or how they got to him, but he was right the first time.
Trump's a businessman. I voted for the guy, but man, it's that doesn't mean I'm immune from criticizing him. And yeah, it's frustrating. I see it as a business thing, and Trump is more of a businessman than he will ever understand the Middle Eastern aspect. So we're seeing a shift now where younger progressive politicians and just younger people in general, especially at the state level for the politicians, are openly advocating or adopting, I should say, anti-Israel language, ideologies tied to groups like the DSA, for example, and others. Is this just a new form of political activism? Is it a trend, or is it something more coordinated?
Oh, it's very much coordinated. There's no doubt about that. You look, for example, at the fact that it rolled out on campuses all over the country and all over Europe right after October 7th. They had it planned. It was all ready to go, the whole campaign. They were just waiting for October 7th to happen. You could tell that by the astroturfed aspect of the campus protests, that they had printed signs, that they all had the same kind of tents when they were going out to stay in tents on campus. Who bought them? Who gave them out? We don't know, but it clearly was coordinated. And it seems as if the global left decided this is the time we're going to turn the whole left against Israel and end the Democratic Party's support for it, make inroads in the Republican Party's support for it, ultimately for the goal of destroying it altogether.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I can even speak to it a little bit. When UCLA was first doing their encampments, I went with a good friend of mine. His name's Cam Higby. He does very much on the ground. He's actually getting dispatched to Dearborn right now because there's protests building up. We put on some keffiyehs, wrap our face, cover our identity, and we were the first to be able to trick them into letting in Zionists. They didn't know we were. They thought we were pro-Palestinian into the encampment. We were the first ones to actually see what was inside. And you're right. Everything was, here's a tarp, here's a tent, here's food. They had mountains of food, like taller than me, of just food for free. Everything. And you're so right. It's like, I asked who paid for that. They had their own security. And I thought, because they said the university funded, I said, oh, it's a security to make sure, one side stays on the other. Nope, it was their security funded by the university. It's insane. One of the clearest examples of this trend we're talking about and this coordinated effort I see is New York Assemblyman, now Mayor Zohran Mamdani. He's been vocal in calling Israel an apartheid state, pushing for boycotts. What's your reaction when you see someone with that kind of platform shaping at a state level, especially in New York City?
Well, this also has been a carefully coordinated effort. He is a carefully marketed product like detergent. He is one of the new crop of far left politicians who all share the same characteristics. I explained this. I don't know if you know, I wrote a book about this guy, which is available now. and it's called Intifada on the Hudson. There he is. Looks like my son, doesn't he? Intifada on the Hudson, the selling of Zohran Mamdani. And anyway, in the book, I show that he is one of many, that there's a whole group of young politicians today who are immigrants or of an immigrant background, who are non-white, who are non-Christian, who are socialists, open socialists. And they all share these characteristics because, of course, in the first place, the idea is to insinuate socialism into the mainstream. But they're doing it under the guise of diversity, which means diversity of skin color, but not of ideology. They all think the same way. And of course, they're all from immigrant background so as to silently support the idea that Trump is a big bad guy for wanting to restrict illegal immigration, and look how much the immigrants have brought to us and still are, and so on. AOC was the first of these, or one of the first of these. Barack Obama was really in a big way, one of the primary paradigms for, or templates for this. Of course, he said he was a Christian, but he was very famously from a Muslim background, immigrant background, non-white, all of that. A socialist, although he denied it. Now, 10 years later, Mamdani doesn't deny it. He comes right out and says that he's a socialist. He denies that he's a Marxist, but he's also that. I've got it in the book. And he is very skillful. He's articulate, he's glib, he's slick, and he's appealing, attractive, charming, handsome, all those things. And it resonates with people. He went to New York and he promised them all this free stuff. He doesn't say, or he's vague about how it's going to be paid for. Just the rich can pay for it. He says, we've got all this money that the rich are not paying in taxes, or they're paying it in taxes, but then it's not being used right, and so on. He's going to fix it all up. And of course, it's just going to become another socialist hellhole if he's allowed to do what he wants to do. He may have some constraints from the assembly and so on, but at the same time, there are a lot of socialists in there too. So he's probably going to just run New York City into the ground. And that, of course, is all part of the socialist plan anyway. They want to destroy the existing system so they can replace it.
Yeah, I 100% see that. I told my father-in-law, who lives in Queens, not visiting you for at least the next 4 years. I will definitely, once I'm done with History of Jihad, that's definitely going to be my next book. I'm going to figure out a way to get it signed from you. Well, actually, before I ask this next question, with Zohran Mamdani, do you think that his anti-Israel narrative is the one that got him elected, or do you think it was more of the socialist aspects?
Oh, I think it was the free buses, the low-cost grocery stores, all that. I mean, the anti-Israel narrative, certainly, we have to be realistic about that has become the popular view, particularly among young leftists. And if he had been pro-Israel, he probably wouldn't have won.
That's right, yeah.
But I think that was just a matter of checking off the boxes. And what they really liked about him was, in the first place, he's a young guy. He's running against Bela Lugosi. And he is, he looks like he's got some energy. He's not 100 years old. He's not got a record of corruption as long as your arm. He's not Andrew Cuomo. So that was very easy, and that was more appealing. But if he hadn't been able to tick that box, probably would have hurt him.
I completely agree. I think it definitely was that, and you're right. I mean, he went up against, some Republican I didn't even hear of before this, but it's New York City, and 2025 Republican's not going to win, and he goes up against Cuomo, still gets, 50% of the vote, so I wholeheartedly agree. You said before that language is often used to blur the lines between activism and extremism. Do you think figures like Mamdani are helping normalize radical ideology, or do you think that will increase even more, or do you think some of this will get lost into the news as we move forward?
Oh, I don't have any doubt that he will be a tremendous agent for the normalization of a radical ideology, particularly specifically Marxism, as well as 12-er Shiite doomsday Islam. But the Marxism he's been quite open about. even while denying the label. In 2020, during COVID, he did a video speech to a socialist gathering where he spoke about the ultimate goal being the seizure of the means of production, which is pure Marxism, and his housing scheme about having the city start to strong arm landlords until they charging them with various forms of non-compliance with city regulations, ones that apparently he intends to make up on the spot and then penalize the landlords for not following, with the whole goal being to seize the housing
It's
and turn it
crazy.
into city-owned collectivized housing that he'll give out. And this is all just pure Marxism. But nobody is there explaining to the people in New York what's wrong with Marxism. What's wrong with this guy? You know, gee, he seems like such a nice guy. What could be the problem? And nobody's there explaining how all of this has been tried before and failed miserably and led to tremendous amount of human suffering.
Yeah, you mentioned, right, because he is Shia, and I almost forgot about that. It kind of a let's pull it back actually to the Middle East and Israel with, obviously Hamas is Sunni, but we have a lot of Shia groups now. Of course, there are Iranian proxies. You have Hezbollah, you have the Houthis, you have the IRGC, all Shia. What do you see that it seems like the Shias are being more direct and aggressive in their attacks against Israel than the Sunnis? Do you think that has to do with some kind of ideology, or that's just a coincidence because it's the IRGC funding them?
It's a combination of several things. One is, in the first place, there's an old Arabic expression that translates to "my brother against my brother, and both of us against our cousin." Sunni and Shia hate each other, but they'll always unite against the infidel. So Hamas is Sunni, but it gets 83% of its funding from the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran wants to be the leader of the Islamic world, but it's Shiite, and Shiites are only 10 to 15% of the Muslims around the world, and Sunnis hate Shia. So how can they become the leader of the Muslim world? One of the ways is they've become the most energetic and active supporter of the foremost cause for the Islamic world today, which is the jihad against Israel. And so they fund Hezbollah, which is Shiite, and they fund the Houthis, who are Shiites, but they also fund Hamas, which is Sunni, because they want to be seen as the one who's really getting this done. As they do that, the Sunni or anything else, because they feel like they'd be cutting their own throats against Iran.
Do you see the enemy, especially when thinking about Saudi Arabia, right? Which I have I don't know what to think about them, right? It seems like when I watch them, I like MBS. I like his relationship, or at least what it looks like when I see it, the relationship with the United States of America and Donald Trump specifically. Do you see Saudi Arabia truly and legitimately pushing towards the United States and possibly in the future Israel only because of their hatred for the IRGC? Or do you think this is totally fake? Or somewhere in between?
It's all about the IRGC and the Islamic Republic in general. It's all about that. If the Islamic Republic were to fall tomorrow, then there would be no more question. The Abraham Accords would also collapse, and there would be no question of Saudi Arabia having any kind of rapprochement with Israel. It's all about Iran. They do not want to aid Iran or empower Iran because they see Iran as a threat to themselves. And so, yeah, that could take them very far. However, the Saudis have a particular balancing act that they have to perform as they continue to have talks with Trump and talks with Israel. And that's because it's the kingdom of the two holy places. And this is a very important thing for Muslims worldwide. And it has been historically, up until quite recently, very strict in its observance of Islam, the Wahhabi school of Islamic thought, and so on. And so you have Saudi Arabia being, in a certain sense, the standard bearer for what Islam is supposed to be. If they stray too far from that under MBS, then the monarchy will be overthrown, because you've got millions of people there who have grown up thinking this is the kingdom of the two holy places and the place for the purity of Islam to be lived out. And now we have an apostate government. Well, then they have to die. And so they can't get too close to Israel because they'll lose their kingdom.
Right.
They might be able to do some things on the QT, which of course there have been widespread reports that they already have done. And as long as Iran remains a threat, then this is still part of then this still could happen. And also there's, of course, the green business, which is less of a factor while Trump is president. But, you know, the Democrats could win in 28 or sometime thereafter and bring it all back. And, you know, oh, the sky is falling and climate change and it's going to be 95 degrees in Alaska, and we have to get rid of the oil-based, petroleum-based economy in order to fix this. It's total voodoo thinking. There's no way. Even if we got rid of every automobile on the planet except for the Teslas, right now, it's not going to change the temperature.
No.
I know I'm getting far afield, but it's just nuts. But the point is, the Saudis have been seeing the writing on the wall for quite some time. They see the oil-based economy is on its way out. And so they're trying to transition to a situation. That's the only reason why those guys are rich. You know, otherwise they got nothing.
Absolutely.
So they want to stay rich, as rich people often do. And so he's trying to diversify the economy and make the country more attractive to foreign investment, which is why women can drive now, and they've relaxed a lot of the laws restricting women's actions. And it's all designed to make people think, yeah, let's open up an office in Saudi. And
that's right.
And anyway, so the point is, the Saudis have a lot of incentive to move closer to Israel, but it's all very dangerous, and it could collapse any minute. And so they've got to be very careful.
Yeah, I served as a nuclear engineer for about 12 years in the U.S. Navy, and now I do engineering, and I can say everything you're saying is 100% correct. The amount of engineering facilities that have opened up in terms of energy, specifically green energy, in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, at least the American companies I can speak to, it is exponential how much they have opened up, and it all has to do with them, in the eyes of everyone, becoming more progressive in Saudi Arabia. So therefore, American companies feel a little bit more relaxed to do business with them. Absolutely. Why is it, to get a little bit more vague, why people in the United States, specifically the United States, but the West as a whole, just don't seem to grasp this threat? Is it because we have a big pond in between us and them, and we're just naive as Americans? What is it?
Well, it's partly that, but it's also because after Islamic jihadis hit the United States and killed 3,000 people, the president, 6 days after that, went to a mosque and said Islam is peace. And, you know, I'm an old man. I was out there talking in those days on Fox and even on CNN and PBS. In those days, it was a big... Oh, and MSNBC. It was very different from how it is now. And saying Islam is not peace, and you're being misled, and you have to understand the nature of the enemy to defeat it. This is one of the oldest laws of warfare, that you have to know your enemy. Anyway, the point is, I lost the discussion, or didn't really lose. It just became foreclosed. Both the left in a big way, but also the whole right, the conservative movement, the Republican Party, they went for the idea that Islam is peace and that there's no real problem with Islam. The problem is with, like you said, with Islamism, which is a totally made-up concept that has no basis in Islamic law or theology. And there it really isn't any separation between the political and the religious in Islam. But in America, people assume that every Muslim you meet is just like every Methodist you meet, or every Baptist, or whatever you want to name. And it's just another way of thinking about God. And it's completely harmless and benign for everybody else. And yeah, there are a few extremists, but they're just like those nuts who carried the "God hates fags" signs a few years back. The
Westboro Baptist, right?
Now, there were about 10 people in the Westboro Baptist Church, and there are hundreds of millions of people who believe that Islam must dominate and not be dominated. But people aren't thinking about that. They have been told that it's Islamophobic and racist to think there might be any problem with Islam. And so we really have nothing to worry about. Build mosques here, increase the Muslim population, everybody's welcome. And that's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's just that I think that it has been pursued under a kind of naivete and willful ignorance regarding a genuine threat.
I think to quote the late Charlie Kirk, he said that the left will use Islam to slice the throat of America.
Yeah, and that's what's happening. Because, the left has completely co-opted the debate about this for decades now. And George W. said Islam is peace, but it was the left that invented the whole idea of Islamophobia and said that you were outside the bounds of acceptable discourse, you were committing hate speech, everybody who is a decent person should shun you if you say Islam is not peace. And they've carried that ball very far for many years and had great success with it.
Yeah, these lives that I do almost every single night, I get called an Islamophobe while I'm reading the Hadiths, mostly Sahih al-Bukhari. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm reading Sunnah right now. Why am I being called an Islamophobe? It's not like I'm reading some Reddit blog post right now. I'm reading Hadiths or the Quran. And yeah, it's very interesting. Do you believe that Israel, it could have been a political measure, but do you believe that Israel did not take out the Ayatollah because they wanted Saudi to still have to fear them? And to expand on that a little bit, do you think Israel, everything you've been talking about with Saudi Arabia and that balance, do you think Israel's thinking ahead with that?
Well, Netanyahu doesn't answer my emails or return my calls. I really don't know what he's thinking. But I don't think that they were quite that Machiavellian. It seemed to me that they wanted to take out the Ayatollah Khamenei and destroy the Islamic Republic, and that it was Trump who stopped them. When that day that he said they don't know what they're doing, and stomped off away from the cameras in hot anger. It seemed to me that it was he who was stopping them, not that they were stopping for some tactical reason. I don't know that the Israeli government is all that concerned about what the Saudis do or not do. Any partnership between Israel and Saudi Arabia is going to benefit Saudi Arabia far more than it does Israel. And so it's a shame they didn't take out the Ayatollah Khamenei, but it seemed like that was the plan.
If more local politicians, and lots of few more questions, and we'll do some Q&A because I know people are dying to ask some questions. If more local politicians start echoing Mamdani's worldview, how do you see this impacting U.S. foreign policy, Jewish safety especially, or even just national security in the next 5 to 10 years? Or do you think this is a New York City specific thing?
No, I had already said he's one of many. Omar Fateh lost his election in Minneapolis, but he was called the Minneapolis Mamdani. He was another socialist immigrant, non-white candidate, and I was surprised, actually. I thought he was going to win, and I expect we haven't heard the last of him. But there are going to be many more. What we see in Mamdani is the future of the Democratic Party. This is the energized base, and they are young, they are socialist, they're unapologetic and open about it, and they're taking over the party. Mamdani's victory over Andrew Cuomo, a stalwart of the Democratic Party establishment, is just one indication of that, but there are going to be many more in the near future.
What do you think that Israel specifically, but also United States, where are we failing in not convincing, in educating this younger population and upcoming generations on this problem? Because we no longer live in an age, ironically, we have more information than ever at our fingertips, but we no longer live in an age where we tell people you just need to do more research, or people just shut up when they don't do research. We don't live in that age anymore. So where is Israel failing in trying to combat this propaganda against her, and the United States and the West as a whole?
I'll tell you, I wrote a book on anti-Semitism last year, and in researching it, I started looking around on X for things, and so now I still get it because the algorithm thinks that I'm an anti-Semite now, and so I get anti-Semitic Twitter all the time.
Same here.
Yeah, and so the thing is, I see all these wild claims being made that I know are false. Excuse me. I'm not going to spend my time arguing with bots, but it seems to me that Israel and its supporters need to have a much more energetic and comprehensive social media presence and answer every lie and be ready and have a repository where all the lies are answered and people can find the answers readily.
Yes, yes, I had a meeting with the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles telling them exactly this. Don't make it complicated. One spot, available immediately. And of course, they, just like Israelis do, go ahead.
Well, people aren't going to go to it. Some people will, but you need two things. You need the site, but also people to put the answers out everywhere that the statements are made.
That's exactly right. And of course, like Israelis do, they go, wow, that's a great idea. I love Israelis. They're so direct. I actually, before we get to the Q&A, you sparked one more question in my mind with... you know what? Actually, let's get back to let's get to some Q&A. I actually do want to give people some time. I never give them enough time. Let's see. Everyone, comment section. Let me see the questions. Nick, can you ask him how can we stop this from spreading? Yeah, that's a good question. How do we stop this from spreading, or is it just a concept of going against a people who have up to 4 wives, have many children, and how do we stop it?
I got to know, what do you mean by this? Are you talking about Islam, the Palestinian jihad, the socialism, what?
I'm going to go with Islam because the Palestinian jihad I find personally to just be a symptom of Islam as a whole.
Well, we got to teach, which I've been doing for so many decades now. And I'm one of the only ones still. There are a few others, and I'm grateful for them, and more power to them, but we need hundreds more that are explaining to people that Islam is not a religion like every other. And you are not a racist bigot if you say it's not good to have a large Muslim population. And be ready. People are going to say, why not, you racist bigot? Well, look at every place in the history of the world where there has been a Muslim population. It has been in conflict with the non-Muslims. That the Muslims started. Conflicts that the Muslims started, and that ends with the conquest by the Muslims of the non-Muslim polity. How are you think you're going to be different here? They don't have a different Quran here. They don't have a different Muhammad. It's all the same. Why do you think you're going to be the only place where we all get along and sing Kumbaya and dance around the whatever people dance around? And
the Kaaba.
The Kaaba. This is just not how it's going to work. And so we need to alert people to the political supremacist, aggressive, expansionist, and violent aspects of Islam. So, I thought it was great when Charlie said that you quoted earlier, about how Islam is the sword that the left is using to slit the throat of the West. That was amazing to me because for so long I'd seen mainstream right figures just say, it's a religion of peace, or we have to distinguish the Islamists from the Muslims. There's no distinction. You can't go down the street and you see Baptist church and Catholic church and Islamist mosque and moderate mosque. It's not like that. The mosque is the mosque. And it's a big effort of education that we have to undertake. But if we don't do it, who's going to?
There's a saying I saw a couple weeks ago. It said the difference between an extremist Muslim and a moderate Muslim is the extremist Muslim says you will follow this or I will behead you, and the moderate one says you will follow this or he will behead you. So you know what? I will ask my question that I was thinking of. So there's a concept that I've seen some Israelis actually say that when you look at international law and how you're supposed to fight war, how do you do that with a country that follows international law versus a country, or a people, I should say, they're not a country, a people who believe international law is a joke? And should Israel continue to just have that quagmire forever with them, or should they start to implement a little bit of fire with fire or jihad with jihad?
Well, you know, Israel is under a very difficult position because anything it does, people start crying about genocide and war crimes and all this. There's another word that's escaping me right now. But anyway, so here again, those claims have to be energetically refuted, far more energetically than they were in this recent conflict. And at the same time, however, I do believe Israel is not well served by doing anything that is outside the lines in terms of international law, because that will only give grist to the mill for those who want to see Israel destroyed. Israel needs to be scrupulous in absolutely correctly doing everything and never making any mistakes. And actually they were, once the real figures. I know the international media doesn't want to get that out, but why aren't Israeli spokesmen constantly reminding people of that at every opportunity that they can? And then it will eventually get out a little bit more than it is now.
Charlie Kirk's letter to Netanyahu explained exactly this and exactly right. Why is the Israeli media not pushing that out much more? BBC, whose head had to resign, and their CEO or director and the head of news both had to resign. They found out that BBC Arabic had to issue on average 2 corrections per week, every week for 2 years when it related to the Israel-Gaza war. 2 corrections. What is this? All right, let's get to some less
Arab Muslim jihadi reporters for the BBC.
Oh, it's insane. It's insane. So let's get the questions. Is the spread of social answer different in any way? I don't really know what that means. Does the spread of social answer differ in any way? I'm not really sure what your question is. I'm sorry. Can you tell us? Someone wants to know what your favorite. I'm going to switch the wording a little bit. Your favorite hadith is.
Favorite hadith?
Yeah, he said funniest, but I'm going to say favorite.
Funniest hadith. That might be easier. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I've never ever thought for a second in my entire life of what my favorite hadith is. I do have a favorite chapter of the Quran. Can I give you that? Because I'm thinking of it and I'm not thinking of hadiths.
Sure.
Chapter 18 is wild. The Quran is just mostly a lot of angry rants against unbelievers. But in chapter 18, you suddenly get these strange stories. You get the 7 Sleepers of Ephesus, which is actually a Christian story that was purloined for the Quran and adapted. And then you get the very strange story of Moses with Khidr, Khidr, which is green. That's what he's called in Islamic tradition. In the Quran, he's not named at all. It's just this guy, and Moses says, "Hey, can I travel with you?" And the guy says, "Okay, but don't ask me any questions." And they go along, and all these weird things happen, and Moses keeps asking questions. Like, "Why'd you do that?" And finally, the guy says, "Okay, look, I'm going to answer your questions, but I'm tired of you. I told you not to ask me any questions, and you keep asking me questions." And it's horrible. Don't get me wrong. Just like the rest of the Quran, like for example, one of the things that Khidr does is they're walking along, he and Moses, and they see this young boy, and Khidr kills him. And Moses says, "What are you doing killing this kid? He was just minding his own business." And he explains later when he explains that the boy was going to grow up to be impious, and his parents are very religious. They deserved a better child. So he killed this one, and presumably they'll have a better child later. That's the impetus, actually. That's the rationale for honor killing in Islamic tradition.
Huh.
And there are all sorts of other things in that chapter. For example, Alexander the Great and his travels, Dul-Qarnain, who he travels to the end of the world and sees the sun setting in a muddy pool. And so it's apparently a flat earth with the sun revolving around it. But anyway, yeah, chapter 18. But there are so many bizarre hadith.
My chat's favorite is the one about Al-Zut. Of course, they like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Going around all over. One that I like is one that Islamic apologists like because it shows Muhammad laughing heartily. And I've seen Eric Ormsby, who's a respected professor, quote it saying, Muhammad had this wonderful sense of humor, and there are hadiths where he's laughing heartily so you could see his back teeth. And Eric Ormsby doesn't mention that it's after a Muslim marksman shot a guy who's making fun of the Muslims. And Muhammad starts laughing and thinks this is great. And so it's another story of cruelty and murder that is presented as Muhammad being charming.
Next question. Someone says, what concerns you more, left-wing or right-wing anti-Semitism?
Well, for years I was concerned about left-wing anti-Semitism because I was the only one who was concerned about it. The ADL and every other Jewish group, as a matter of fact, I was speaking once in Florida to a Jewish group, and I was debating a rabbi, in fact, and a woman in the crowd brought me this big stack of magazines that were published by Jewish organizations in the United States. And all of them were warning about anti-Semitism from the right. And not a single one of them said a word about anti-Semitism from the left. And in those days, we only saw anti-Semitism from the left, and we only ever heard about it from the right. Now we're getting a lot of anti-Semitism from the right, and I don't think it should be discounted. It's obviously real, but let's keep an eye on the fact that the real driver here is from the left right now.
The problem, the thing I get worried about the left is it seems more systematic, and the right is more noise. But of course, it doesn't mean I take my eye off of it as a right-wing person. It very much upsets me. Another question. Douglas Murray warns us that Arab Muslim anti-Semitism is more difficult to fight because it's taught in their mosques. So in countries that support free speech and religion, how do we fight it without infringing on those rights, or do we have to infringe on them? That's a good question.
Well, we have to understand that Islam does teach this, that the Jews are the worst enemies of the Muslims, and that they're enemies of Allah, who are always scheming against the Muslims, and that they're cursed by Allah and changed into apes and pigs, that Muslims have to make war against them. All these things are in the Quran, and there's plenty more in the Hadith. So, what do we do about this in the United States? We have to make it very clear in a way that we've not been doing, that the religious freedom of the First Amendment is not some license to break other laws, and not some license to commit illegal acts. And so you're preaching hatred of Jews, and you are preaching in the context of a religion where the people are the executors of the wrath of the deity, which they are in Islam. That should be considered to be incitement to violence and prosecuted accordingly. And if we enforced our laws against these things and made it very clear to Islamic groups that we were going to do so, a lot of this problem would disappear. But right now, there is this idea that the freedom of religion is some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card that lets them break every other law. Well, jihad against unbelievers and slitting the throats of the infidels, that's Islamic law too. So is it religious freedom to allow them to do it? Obviously, we have to draw some sensible parameters here.
It's very interesting, right? Because when you look at, if there was just a political ideology or political movement or party that was saying the exact same words, just take out the religion aspect of it, or at least calling yourself a religion, it would be no question that people would criticize it more. People would say it. But the second they say, oh, but by the way, this is my religion, all of a sudden there's this concept where a lot of people are like, oh, I'm sorry, never mind. And it's, well,
Yep.
what is that? Do you fear, wait, let me pull the question up. Here it is. Do you fear that there will be another holy war in Europe, and will that war come to our shores if you do believe so?
Yes, there will. I don't particularly fear it, but it's pretty much inevitable at this point because the Islamic populations are going to grow and they're going to try to take over. And at that point, there will be a certain irreducible group of non-Muslims who do not want to be taken over. And there will be armed conflict in many of the countries of Europe. And will it spill over to the United States? Really depends on the size of the Muslim population at that time.
Right.
But there has never been a place in the history of the world where Muslims and non-Muslims have lived together as equals in peace in a secular society. It's never happened. It's not going to happen in Europe now.
Do you find the rise in secularism in Europe to be the at least more direct fault of what allowed Islam to take such a prominent control of Europe as we see today?
Oh, absolutely. Nature abhors a vacuum. And they forgot their history. They forgot that when Europe was Christian, it fought against the Muslims and kept them from taking over Europe. And then when it lost its Christian faith, the Europeans invite them in and open the doors and bring them in large numbers. So this is all about the secular left. Now, I'm not advocating for Christian theocracy, but I do think that it's very clear that this is a spiritual struggle as well as a political one. And we have to be uncompromising and unyielding and recover our own traditions and teach our children about Christianity and about Judaism and so on. And understand that as being a matter of the survival of our nations as free societies.
Someone who's not a Christian, I wholeheartedly advocate maybe not necessarily theocracy, but for Christian to spread. Sometimes I even try to proselytize Christians to become, or excuse me, Muslims to become Christian, because I see that their first step is to separate Christians from their ideology and from the Jewish allyship between Christians and Jews, and then after that separate Christians from their church. And I'm starting to see it on X. Like you said, they think I'm an anti-Semite. I just keep getting anti-Semitic X. I just posted something today on X where they said, just so you Christians know, all or most of your churches are Zionists. I'm like, there it is. They're going to start to try to separate Christians from their church. And of course, it's a ploy they're trying to push. One or two more questions. Somebody asked, other than, of course, your books, which I advocate a lot for because I love your books. I've read probably more from you than any other author, actually. Other than your books, what are some of your favorite books that teaches you about these concepts we're talking about in Islamism, etc.?
One big one that I read in the 90s that had a lot to do with my starting to do this work publicly was Batya Or, The Decline of Eastern Christianity Under Islam. And also she's written The Dhimmis and Islam and Dhimmitude and Eurabia, all I highly recommend. You want to know the historical background of what's happening today, why what's happening, read Batya Or. Then there is Ibn Warraq, the great ex-Muslim scholar, who has written The Quest for the Historical Muhammad, The Origins of the Quran. I actually have them right over here. What the Quran Really Says, Leaving Islam, Why I Am Not a Muslim. That one had a big effect on me also in the 90s. And so I highly recommend the two of those, but there are plenty of fine writers out there.
All right, one more question, you guys. Let me see here. Nah, we already asked that. Okay, I like this one. They want to know about what your thought is on sleeper cells in the United States of America, and is that a problem more than what we already think about it?
Very much so. Way back in 2008, I wrote a book called Stealth Jihad, and it was all about exactly that the jihad doesn't always advance by spectacular, violent attacks, but by stealthy means. And in it, just one of the things in it is a communique from a Hezbollah cell to another one saying, we're not attacking in the U.S. right now. We're getting everything we want without violence, and the violence just brings us unwanted law enforcement attention. So no attacks right now. But they were there then. I have no reason to believe they all packed up and went home since then. And they could become violent at any time they deem it to be appropriate.
Very much so. Okay, Robert Spencer, thank you so much for having us. Please tell us one more time, for anyone that just got into the live, your newest book that you just wrote about Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah, Intifada on the Hudson, The Selling of Zohran Mamdani, available now. Also, coming in just a week will be another book called Holy Hell, Islam's Abuse of Women and the Infidels Who Enable It. And so watch for that as well. Okay.
Thank you so much, Robert Spencer. It was an absolute honor and pleasure having you, and God bless.
You too, Nick. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.